Another day, another blessing, and another chance at life. A new day also means a new beginning. Forget about the past and have a fresh start. Today is another opportunity to make right choices and make your goals. Good morning, everyone. This is Dainisha, Assistant Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering. On behalf of Francis Xavier Engineering College, an autonomous institution in Tirunelveli, we, Department of Civil Engineering, delighted to offer and gracious welcome to everyone for joining today's session of second phase IICTE sponsored 1 week short-term training program on basic of remote sensing, geographical information system, and global navigation satellite system. Define success on your own terms, achieve it by your own rules, and build a life you are proud to live. All your dreams can come true if you have the courage to pursue them. It's a great honor for me to introduce and welcome a man with distinct vision, Mr. Kirba Mohan, System Developer, Institute of Geoinformatics, University of Münster, Germany, Fraunhofer University for Building Physics, Research Assistant, German Aerospace Center. He did his BE Geoinformatics from Anna University Regional Center, Tirunelveli, and currently pursuing Masters in Geoinformatics at Institute for Geoinformatics in University of Münster, Germany. His research focuses on devising a standardized preparation of municipal geodata for urban climate simulation, and that has been funded by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. He has undergone a 6 month internship as a system developer in the World DEM project at Airbus Defence and Space in Germany, and has developed a web application for 3D visualization of World DEM using cloud platforms and also supported it with virtual reality. He has also worked in visual analytics at the Civil Safety and Geo-Risk under Earth Observation Department in German Aerospace Center and has worked in the project Extreme Event Identification using social media datasets and Earth observation with natural language processing and machine learning techniques. He is one of the performer in Macmillan examinations conducted by University of New South Wales over South Asian countries. We are certainly grateful to him for accepting our invitation humbly and gladly to become the guest speaker for this session. We are really thankful to him for taking the time out of his busy schedule to present this session. On behalf of Department of Civil Engineering and on my own behalf, I welcome you, sir. Participants, we are looking forward on your active participation. I ensure the session will be profitable and fruitful for everyone present here. Welcome you one and all. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time to our guest speaker, Mr. Kirba Mogan, sir. Over to you, sir.
Um, yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the lovely introduction, madam. So, uh, as you know, my name is Kriba Mohan. I'm currently working as a research assistant in Fraunhofer Institute of Building Physics in Munich, in Germany. And I'm also currently doing my master thesis in Fraunhofer Institute as well. So, um, um, once again, welcome everyone to this webinar session. So today we are going to discuss uh, about the topic of bridging Earth observation with the current trends. So here is the overview of the things that we are going to see in this session. So at first, we are going to see about what the Earth observation is about, and then how the Earth observation has evolved during these years, and then we can evaluate like how the Indian scenario is present while compared to the world scenario, and then we can and then we generally gradually move to the current trends such as Internet of Things, big data, and cloud services, and then we can take an overview about how Earth observation techniques are used in these kind of new trends, and then of course machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence methods that are currently available in our Earth observations, and finally how in the final session, final slides, we are going to see about how Earth observation data can be visualized using virtual reality and augmented reality. So as we know, that today's session is more about Earth observation. So let us have a quick look into about it. So Earth observation is a gathering of information about the physical, chemical, and biological system of the planet. So the observations are obviously obtained from satellites or aircrafts. It can be obtained from drones or ground monitoring situations or from an in situ data environments. So the Earth observation is generally used to monitor and assess the status of changes in natural environments such as seas, lakes, glaciers, mountains, ocean beds, and stuff, and etc. And also it focuses on the man-made environment like dams and other buildings that are built by man-made. Uh, Generally, the term Earth observation encompasses the both spatially acquired data as well as the ground-based or in situ measurement data. So, people have always tried to look our planet in new different ways, and throughout the years, some people have succeeded in inventing a number of methods with which to do so. So here is like an complete general overview of how some of the notable movements in the history changed the course of Earth monitoring. So around in the 1850s and 1860s, uh, cameras attached to the balloons, which were flighted in the area in the space, which provided the first aerial photography. So which started the remote sensing and other stuff. So in 1860s, late 1860s, kites were also flown after, and then in the starting early 1900s, so to speak, uh, people started taking photos from carrier pigeons. A German engineer who designed a small camera, which he was able to strap it on the bird, so people started to take photos from the pigeons. And then the major development in the aerial photography, we have to owe it to the two world wars, because the countries like Britain and Germany uh, reinforced the importance of the aerial images to plan attacks on them. So they kind of find innovative ways to take aerial imageries. And then the first major satellite, which was kind of specifically designed for an Earth observation purpose, was launched in 1972 by NASA. It was launched as an Earth Resource Technology Satellite ERTS-1, which was then renamed later as Landsat, which is the starting point of many long-running series of multispectral remote imaging spacecraft, which we now are getting images from Landsat 1 to Landsat 8 series. And then in 1991, European Space Agency, it launched its first Earth observation satellite. After many programs, satellites from NASA and ESA, finally in 2003, uh, and 2003 and 2000, around in the range of 2003 to 2005, international governments interconvened to launch a global environment Earth observation system of systems, GOSS, which is a worldwide network meant to knit together the international Earth monitoring capabilities. It kind of made Earth observation technology into a new phase. There is a new paradigm shift that was happened there. Then the satellite started flowing, ebbing around. Every country started to launch satellites around them. Uh, as the moment we speak, there are above 50 active Earth observing satellites that are in orbit as we speak. Once you can take a look at the evolution of the Earth observation, there are only two major players in the world scenario. The one is NASA, another one is ESA, the European Space Agency. NASA satellites continuously orbit along the globe, collecting information about the Earth's ocean, atmosphere, and land surfaces. Satellites they can even monitor the activity of life forms, such as even to the single microbial organism to everything in the world. Nowadays, we can able to do it. NASA's Earth observation strives to make global satellite imagery as access as possible. Their motto is to picture climate and environmental changes as they occur on our home planet. Over 50 global data sets are represented with daily, weekly, and monthly snapshots, and then these data sets are available in various formats, including JPEG and GeoTIFF and stuff, etc. So NASA acquires, archives, distributes data from variety of sources, including remote sensing instruments such as satellites and airborne platforms. But it also collects data from ground stations and ground sensors. These kind of measurements help us to understand the climatic change better, weather changes better, and then disaster, and then we can easily mitigate disasters according to it. So the main aim of NASA is to make it available to everyone. So we can browse and download imagery of satellite from NASA's constellation of Earth observation satellites using Earth data sets. Like you can search it by keyword using an geographical or temporal extent. You can get any data through Earth data sets, which are which are included in the 50 global data sets that NASA provides. And then there is another service called Global Imagery Browser Services, which enables high performance and high availability data. And it also provides an number of ways for viewing imagery and creating visualizations of data. So there are tools, NASA has tools which provides real-time imagery for some of the NASA's Earth observation missions, which we can be viewed through a tool called WorldView. WorldView is an interactively you can interactively browse and download full resolution global satellite imagery from around about 1,000 data products from NASA's land, atmosphere, and other data providers. So this is the constellation of satellites that NASA have launched over these years. So these are the satellites which are currently orbiting around our place, which constitutes the constellation of satellites for Earth observation for NASA. So as I said, there are two players in the world scenario. One is NASA and the second one is European Space Agency. European Space Agency is a world leader in Earth observation, and it still remains dedicated to cutting-edge spaceborne technology to further understand the planet, improve daily lives, and support policy making for a more sustainable future. The mission of Earth observation program is to keep observation techniques at most updated state. So it opens up new horizons, and it is always key to getting its products. Its main objective is to pursue scientific knowledge and transfer it to the entire human society. So as you know, the European Union's Copernicus program is one of the largest environmental monitoring program in the world. As you know, the Sentinel satellites are developed specifically for this Copernicus program. So these Sentinels provides a key set of information services which has a wide range of applications, which makes every step, every change in the step, we can manage how we can manage environment, understand how we can understand and tackle the effects of climate change, and safeguard every life. So each Sentinel mission is carries the state of art, the updated, most updated technology to deliver a stream of imageries which can complement the other constellation of the Copernicus. So these data, the main thing of Copernicus is their intention is to make the data which are free of charge and which are open to the users worldwide, which not only uses the essential task of monitoring environment, but also it creates more jobs and more opportunity, business opportunities. So it is a it's a complete overview of what ESA's plan over the span of 30 years, from 10 years, from back to the 10 years to the 2030s. Uh, so as we look what the world scenario is, so let us see about what our country does. So the Indian scenario, ISRO starting with IRS-1A in 1988, ISRO has launched many satellites. Where so today India has one of the largest constellation of remote sensing satellites in operation. Currently, there are 13 Sun-Synchronous orbit satellites, which starts from ResourceSat to Cartosats and OceanSats. And then we also have a four geosynchronous satellites, which is of INSAT series. These variety of these data which have been inflown from these kind of satellites provides necessary data in a diversified spectral, spatial, and temporal resolution, which of course caters to the different user requirements in the country as well as for the global usage. The data from these several satellites are used for agriculture, water resources, urban planning, and etc. Uh, uh, ISRO, apart from these remotely sensed satellites, it also has a ground station in National Remote Center in Hyderabad, which also provides other in situ measurements, such as ground measurements, so to say. Uh, you can also browse and download imagery of satellite data from Bhuvan, which is ISRO's own geoportal, which allows users to explore the products that have been prepared from ISRO. It has These are the main satellites which are launched by ISRO over the period of time. Um, I think uh, I think the previous sessions have covered a little bit more about the data that you can obtain from this, but I just don't want to get too deep into it. But this is just an overview of what you can get from ISRO. You can for urban planning, the Cartosat is one of the most sorted plan, and then ocean stat is kind of as an it's certain distinction over the coastal regions and stuff. So, so we had a quite short, brief look at what Earth observation is, and then how the Earth observation has evolved, and then how does this various space organizations has 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 its stakes at it. So now we are moving to the current trends. So these are the Internet of Things, IoT, the big data and cloud data are the most happening things, maybe in the last decade or maybe the 5 year or 6 years, so to speak. So we are going to take a look about it. So the IoT, the Internet of Things is a network of devices connected to the internet that transmit data to the cloud for central processing. Once the data is collected, it can be analyzed for meaningful and actionable insights and stuff. So it's generally a concept of connecting any device to the internet or to the other connected devices. These sensor can be embedded in everyday objects such as ranging from cell phones, vehicles, to portable machines. But they are also can be part of larger machines such as aircraft engines or oil platforms or something like that. IoT is generally a giant network of connected things and people. It includes extraordinary number of objects of all shapes and all forms. You can even take a smart microwave which can automatically cook your food for the right time, for the right length of time, to the latest hot topping, the self-driving cars which has a complex sensors to detect objects on their path. So the IoT is kind of into everything. The most common example is like everyone wears a Fitbit nowadays. So the wearable fitness devices that measure your heart rate, or it measures your number of steps that you've taken in a day. These kind of information are used to suggest or exercise plans tailored to you. IoT devices generally use variety of methods to connect and exchange data. For example, in private households or in office, the IoT chips are connected to a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to you can download the information by connecting it to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something like that. But in other remote areas or others uh, outside areas, so to speak, uses LTE or even satellite connections for the communications. The major player, the IoT, the major booming, so to say, the booming fields of the IoT are identified as these kind of six topics. So tourism, while many industries can benefit from the IoT technology, the travel and tourism sector is particularly well placed to reap the rewards from it. Because IoT can enable more automation, more personalization, and great customer experience. Generally, you can even streamline day-to-day task from a remote place. Even if you wanted to maintain your temperature in your room, you can even do it with your smartphone and etc. You can even maintain your traveling, and you can maintain your baggages without being even in the present in person. So tourism is uh, one of the industries which is going to be more benefited from this IoT. And the next thing is agriculture. Data, tons of data which are collected from sensors, uh, weather sensors, soil quality sensors, which can be used in monitoring of climatic conditions, which in a smarter way, which in a smarter way you can monitor crop growth and efficiency and make uh, make accuracy driven decisions. You can always be informed about the weather conditions or about the nutrients that your plant requires. So the precision farming is one of the major things that going to boom due to the IoT technology. Precision farming is all about efficiency and making accurate data driven decisions. At the end, nowadays the bigger players in the agriculture field, such as BASF or the John Deere, they are going to have an end-to-end farm management systems. It is one of the most complex approach of using an IoT, but it also uses a variety of combination of sensors and the devices, uh, which also has a powerful dashboard in the site to give a complete agricultural solution for a farm field. Agricultural drones are kind of used for these purposes, which provides real-time monitoring of the crop field as well. So, considering our environmental observation, environment monitoring is one of the things where IoT has more interest on. So, the application of Internet of Things in environmental are kind of broad, which ranges from extreme weather monitoring or towards an endangered species, or it can be to minute like endangered species protection. In this application, sensors detect and measure every type of environmental change, for example, air pollution, water quality, and etc. IoT improves on this technology by reducing the human presence over it, allowing frequent sampling of data over increasing the range of sampling because it can be automated. So uh, it increases everything by scale, it increases everything by accuracy, it increases everything by frequent sampling and stuff, and also it also give us an response effects to the detection system, so we can prevent substantial contamination or disasters beforehand. So we have an already informed decision before the calamity strikes. So the extreme weather through powerful advanced system allows us to have a deep monitoring to our earth resources and stuff. The radar and satellites play a major role in monitoring, but these instruments provide smaller details, which is more accurate in nature. So while combining these, they can provide an like a next level of monitoring purposes. And then new IoT also is flexibility in range. It is compatible to every instrument, and it's easy in deployment. This allows early detection and early responses, which in turn reduces the prevention of loss of life and property even during the disaster times. Uh, so, so there are these are working examples in a lot of places. So these IoTs. So the first one is the Big Belly, which is an shoot of smart bins which are placed all over a city. So these waste bins communicates their real-time status and notify the crews who has their location. So they will come. The crews will be ready to collect it whenever the wastes are completely filled, which it also reduces the human labor. It also reduces the constant visiting of person. It also reduces the loss of it reduces the losses that we are occurring. So it having enough capacity and knowing when to collect streamline waste management increases productivity, which in turn keeps the places clean and green. And another very important IoT application prevailing now is citizens. So it has an air mobility application. So it is an application which shows the air quality of the place whenever you are traveling. Uh, it shows the air quality of the street which you are traveling at the real time. So how this thing works is there are a lot of hundreds of these citizen sensors are strategically placed all over the city. So it monitors the particulate matters of PM 2.5 and 2.10 in real time and on each street that available on the city. So this information can empower you to make decisions that immediately improve your quality of life. Uh, it also provides a georeferenced map view with the location of the sensors that are installed in your city. So which one click at any point, you can see the pollution level at any point in a real time. So you can also plan your journey based on that. It also makes you less exposure. It makes you to choose the roads which has the lesser amount of exposure to air pollution at that exact moment. Uh, and another one of IoT applications that are currently prevailing is FIMANT, Flood Inventation, Mapping and Alert Network for Transportation. So the mission of the FIMAN is to provide rain data, flood maps, and flooding impacts in real time to support to make decisions risk-based decisions regarding a calamity such as flooding in a city. It gathers and distributes reliable and accurate rain data. It provides real-time flood maps, and it also provides the mitigation maps wherever it also shows the way you can avoid the floods. It also provides a way out from the floods for you. Which in turn it prevent and reduce the loss of lives and property. Uh, the FIMANT, it has a website which provides real-time data on stream elevation, rainfall, and every weather parameters that are available in the area of North Carolina. So there are around 550 gadgets that are gadgets, 550 gadgets in the sense 550 sensors that are planted all over the North Carolina, uh, which uh, which are maintained by Division of Emergency Management and Geological Surveys. So these data from these NCM sensors in North Carolina are transmitted by radio networks, which in turn is transmitted by the internet to a central database, which displays the current reading in the website. So the website contains an inundation map at the selected sites across all over the state, all over the Carolina, as well as near the river basins. So the once if the risk increases, flood risk information is provided with these inundation maps. For each incremental rise in the flood water, buildings, roads, and infrastructure would be impacted, and the places which would be more impacted would be identified easily, and then the mitigation work can be directionalized to the most needed place it can. So the emergency and the first responders can be at the correct place at the right time. So it also provides information on water depth on each building affected, along with the estimated damage cost, which also shows then it also shows the next part of the disaster management, which is called development after the disaster. So it also shows how much the estimated damage cost might be. So that's with IoT. So the next thing we are going to see about is big data. The term big data, which in turn refers to data which is so large, but it has been famously articulated by Doc Laney in 2000s as a definition by three V's: volume, velocity, and variety. Uh, the act of accessing and storing large amount of data has been around a long time, uh, but it has been only gained momentum after 2000s about how efficiently we can manage this kind of big data. So the three V's of the big data are volume, velocity, and variety. The volume obviously is the amount of data that obtained from variety of sources, and now the introduction of IoTs and other stuff, social medias and stuff. There are it is estimated amount of 440 zettabytes of data should be created by this end of year 2020, which is around 105% increase while compared to the last 5 years. Uh, and the velocity is the measure of how fast the data is coming in. Uh, Data streams into business is unprecedented speed, and it has to be handled in a timely manner and stuff. So, and the variety, the data doesn't only comes in a traditional formats, but it also comes in an unstructured text, as well as videos and images and numeric data and stuff, etc. The big data chain, generally as a remote sensing data, so generally huge in number and bulky in number. So there are 5 high-level activities of big data that are happening right around in the market. So the first one is data acquisition, which is referring to the gathering, filtering, and cleaning of data before it analyzed. So the major players that are doing the data acquisition are DLR, which is the German Space Center, uh, and obviously NASA and ISRO. These kind of people are the ones who acquires the data from it. So they kind of uses these big data acquisition around this, and then once the data is collected, gathered, and filtered, and then the process through which the raw data are made useful is the process called data analysis. And DLR is one of the leading players in this kind of big data analysis. And the third stage is the data curation, which corresponds to the control of quality or diversity of the data that are flown in. If the data which meets the certain requirements, or it's certain requirements for certain usage and stuff like that. This is kind of a new activity, but it's kind of getting more traction nowadays. Um, And the data storage, which includes storage and management of data that has been previously acquired, analyzed, and curated. It is at this point the commodity business end of the satellite data starts. So the bigger spatial vendors such as Airbus and ESRI comes into play here. And the data usage the big data, it always the you have the one big advantage of the big data is you always have a huge number of data, so you can make a business help business on decision making. So the main players in the field are the larger companies like Google, Amazon, and stuff, which has a major infrastructure, and their opportunities but the opportunities are kind of slowly developing for SMEs in response to the growing needs of the data usage. The data meaning from data that we are obtaining from Earth observation process programs will continue to grow exponentially in the coming years. Therefore, there will be a enormous amount of raw data that needing to be processed and made available in order to become available. Uh, the data analytics in Earth observation will be a key challenge in the future coming days. So a small fraction of the data produced nowadays at present, the small fraction of the data produced EU is only useful for research and interesting commercial use. So therefore, the creation of a better filtering system and processing of uh, higher rate data is a challenge, which is a major challenge in remote sensing industry while regarding the data, big data. So obviously, while we have discussed the storage capacity because of the bigger data, so that's where the cloud computing comes into play. So generally, people who analyzes and stores data doesn't have enough infrastructure to do that. So that's where the cloud computing comes into the scene. Cloud computing is basically the provision of computer resources such as servers or storage or databases or network components, softwares, analysis and stuff via internet. That is the cloud, in order to offer faster functions and flexible resources, and also it also scales up the economy. You only pay in cloud computing, you only pay for the cloud services that actually use, which in turn reduces your operating cost, which also makes the infrastructure of your local server run more efficiently, and you can scale up as much as you want whenever you require. um, so the cloud computing is the technical capability to use the IT infrastructures and services that are not installed in your local computer or a server, but you can access it from in remote places. The cloud computing, it serves as a three-way thing. It infrastructure as a service. It is the simplest category of cloud computing. It provides our IT infrastructure such as servers and virtual computers, storage and stuff, and you have to pay it and pay for these services. It also acts as a platform as a service. It is an on-demand environment, so if you can buy it if you want for developing, testing, and deploying software applications. The rapid development of mobile apps is one of the major advantage for this kind of platform services. You can deploy or you can test it within a second, so without being making the change to the original server. Um, and then the next one is the software as service, which is cloud company act as a method of delivering software applications over the internet, so you don't have to physically do it anymore. Uh, it is infrastructures are hosted and managed by the cloud providers itself, and their maintenance tasks are their security patches are also taken over by the cloud provider. So the user only has the only availability of the user has to only has via internet using a web browser. You can access it using a web browser on a mobile phone or tablet or PC. It is made as easy as possible for you. So the major player in cloud services in our Earth observation or remote sensing or GIS, so to speak, is ESRA. The ESRA cloud ArcGIS called. It allows you to host your applications and services on the other computers, which eliminates the need to purchase and manage hardware. This cloud can be used as a platform for your GIS applications and services in a number of ways, increasing operational efficiency, which is like the cloud infrastructure allows GIS user to systematically or temporarily increase your computing power and data storage capacity without impacting your IT infrastructure. You just have to pay for what you want to choose. If it doesn't have to pay, if you don't need this infrastructure for the next month, you can opt to not pay for that month. In other words, it's an in ability in a nutshell, the ability to extend an organization's capability without making more changes to the IT infrastructure makes this cloud technology as more suitable for the companies which are dealing with geospatial bigger data, geospatial data now. And in addition, like as an advantage, you don't have to have a zero capital investment, which is very well for the startup which are blooming up. And the second one is you can deliver the satellite images in a streamlining application. So GIS developers are founding ArcGIS is a cloud is an ideal environment for building and testing application prototypes. You can carve out your own space in the cloud so that you can provide computing resources that also matches the destination's infrastructure. So that there won't be any incompatibility between the softwares, and it also has an access API software development components, which makes the developers life easier, so to speak. So the major advantage is when the applications and services are ready for the next beta testing, the next day, they can be shared with the specific user groups or actual customers for gathering feedback or making refinements. Since it is easy to deploy, the application can be migrated from one environment to another environment or moved to a production environment in the cloud. And another bigger player in the cloud services is Airbus. Uh, it provides customer yeah, and, 365 days security of customers' data, regardless of whether it's customers' property data or the company's property data. And then it also allows you to have a single access. So you can access everything from a single centralized location. And then streaming services, you can the satellite imagery and the base maps you can access from anywhere in the world within the cloud within a second. You can also use the WebGIS technologies, web mapping software services, web map tile services, REST API, Google Earth overlay, and every other things that are used in major software. And another thing using cloud is the customers can easily conduct advanced programming using their own algorithm or the algorithm that are provided by the companies, such as auto rectification, vegetation indices, change reduction, land cover process through these cloud services. And it also you can in minutes a customer can log in and task the satellite of their choice to the area of interest of their choice on the next satellite pass or next satellite revisit time. So if you want an this is very much helpful in emergency situation when you need a satellite image within an hour or so. You can time your own satellite pass within a minute or something like that. So so that these three kind of current trends, which are the IoTs, the big data, and cloud services. So the Myriad is an is a new innovation by Copernicus Masters, uh, which combines three technologies to provide and complete service. So Myriad is an Internet of Things system which triggers UAV surveys based on the change detection over the Copernicus imagery. So Myriad, it is a satellite trigger drone. So the change detection has been performed by a satellite Copernicus imagery, performed over Copernicus imagery. If if in this process, if the system detects any changes in the place, then it triggers a drone, which is supported by the Internet of IoT things. So the drone will survey the area which the change detection is acquired, and it also collects the data from the sensors which are placed near the data. So it is a new age technology which combines uh, IoT satellite Earth observation data and drones to combine to provide and real-time monitoring. So this one is a quite hard in monitoring large industrial areas or large landscape that can go unnoticed. So even if in remote areas such as hard terrains, or in glaciers, you can easily monitor them within few seconds or with a less amount of things. And it also uses an artificial intelligence to. It also started implementing artificial intelligence to detect the changes over Copernicus datasets, which are obtained from Sentinel-1, 2, and 3 satellites. And once the changes are detected, it sends those changes to the UAV, which will then automatically fly over the area in which the changes are acquired. These acquired images from the UAV will be further processed to confirm or validate the changes which has been noted by the Copernicus. The solution will automatically monitor large industrial area, which is in the coverage of Copernicus, and it also gives high resolution imagery with help of UAVs. So this will reduce the time span between detection and action. If there is any complete detection is noted, the action can be taken within a few minutes or so, which it also increases the efficiency and safety over the industrial areas. Even if in the event of sudden environmental disasters, it provides fast and reliable information, which uh, which in turn uh, which in turn will prevent the loss of damages to the economical things, or which will also prevent a life loss if the action is taken in at the right place at the right time. Uh, so the next thing we are going to see about is machine learning on AI. So let us take a little pause. So if you have anything to ask about these kind of past topics, you're feel free to ask now, or else we can continue to the machine learning part.
So
Yeah, ma'am.
you can continue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next current trend is machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence, which has been the hot topic over, I think, the last 3 years. Every new innovation technologies has been which more or less has been a part of as a result of the artificial intelligence algorithm. Um, so the easiest way to this relate these kind of term is to see it as an concentric circles as a circles, with artificial intelligence is the bigger part. So the artificial intelligence is the idea that came first. That's why it's a larger circle. Then the machine learning idea came to exist. And then finally, deep learning came into the scene, which is responsible for the new kind of innovations in AIs and stuff. So this is the history of AI. So AI has been a part of our imaginations, our kind of in words all over the computer scientists in even in the 1950s. But AIs in the decades has been AIs in the past 2 decades has been heralded as the next biggest thing, or even to a term our civilization's next big thing, or civilization's next biggest bright future also depends upon artificial intelligence. So the over past few years, AI has been boomed, especially since 2015 or so, so to say. It also has to do with the fact that our computing powers has been increased. There are the GPUs and the parallel processing, which makes everything faster, cheaper, and more powerful. So we have an infinite storage capacity now, and we also have in due to IoTs and big data, there are a lot of data, flood of data flowing in at every time, um, such as images, text, transactions, maps, you name it, everything has been flowing in a second. So that's why the large amount of data and more computing power has made AI has been more possible in more distant, more real future. So let's start with the machine learning. Machine learning is a subset of an artificial intelligence that allows all software application to become more accurate at predicting outcomes without being programmed to do so. Like it has the ability to build system that can automatically learn and improve from the previous experiences without being asked to improve. So it improves on it learns from its past experiences. So yeah, it is a basic practice of using algorithm to parse data and learn from it, and then make a determination or prediction about something in the world. It is a most basic definition of machine learning. Most of us use machine learning in our day-to-day life. Maybe whenever you guys used in Netflix, YouTube, or even in music platforms like Spotify. So there will be a kind of recommendation system going around there, which is a part of machine learning, which is also a part of machine learning. And then in the most popular machine learning thing you have encountered will be in Google or Yahoo, which uses machine learning things to provide the results for your searches by and nowadays you have find the speaking assistants such as Siri, Alexa, or Google Home voice assistants, which is also an product byproduct of machine learning. So in machine learning, we train the algorithm by providing a lot of data and allowing it to learn more about it from the processed information. So there are two two important concepts in machine learning or deep learning or AI is training data and test data. So the first, you train a system using the trained data, in which the training data, the input data and expected output data are already decided. So with the historical data, the previous data, the ground truth, the training data, the input and our expected output are given to the system. uh, these data are made by humans or even in a semi-automated way by like the small programmings. So this data is used in the training phase of the machine learning algorithm. The text data is used in the testing phase, which only gives the input data, and the system is already trained to predict the outcome. So it is used only to test the model's accuracy or something like that. Trainings. So this is the basic workflow of a normal machine learning algorithm to detect an object. So training set is implemented to build a model, or the training data set which has an uh, proper input and output data is inputted into it, and then the feature is extracted, and then it is used to classify based upon a lot of machine learning classifiers such as SWM, K neighbors, and then random forest, and there are a lot of classifiers available. Once the data is classified, the classified data is collected, which is again given into input as a testing data. So in machine learning, we basically try to create a model to predict the test data. So training data is kind of used to fit the model, and the train and to train the model to test it. So the models are generated to predict the results of an unknown, which is what we named it as a test data. The data set is divided into train and testing based upon it, and the training data and these data are used to train the model and set in order to check accuracies and precisions by training and testing on it. So there are two ways in which the machine learns to improve its thing. So the one is called supervised learning. Supervised is one of the first types of machine learning in which the training is given with the data which is labeled. That is where the input and the output are clearly classified or clearly marked. We input the data in the learning algorithm as a set of input which is called as futures, which may be denoted by uh, which can be denoted by x, and with the corresponding outputs which is y. The algorithm learns by comparing with x the input and output, and learn it on its own. Whenever the large amount of data you provide it, that's where the training data comes into play. A huge amount of training data sets are uh, provided to the algorithm in each and every day. So the algorithm learns to deal with it without our instruction. So it started to analyze it on its own and started to uh, find some similarities and stuff like that. That's why it's called. That's why the classification and regression model comes into play. Uh, Regression, it's a type of supervised learning in which labeled data is used, but the data in the output, data which the algorithm predicts, which will be in a continuous form. The output of input is always the output will be in a continuous manner. If we graph the output in a output, it will be in a linear fashion. That between the relationship between the output and the input is kind of in a linear fashion. So this kind of regression technique is used in weather forecasting or temporal time series, or even in a change reduction kind of a thing, which makes the process an optimized process. Classification is kind of which is pretty simple. The input data is labeled, but the system makes predictions in a non-continuous form. The output of the information is not continuous because the data is classified based on their similarities. So whenever there are four kind of classifications will be available after an end result. So if you draw a graph, it will be a non-linear graph. The next uh, the next type of learning of machine learning is unsupervised learning, in which the AI system is presented with unlabeled data, uncategorized data. The data is provided without any structure, without any order, but the algorithm takes care of it. Algorithm finds relationship between it and then predicts the output data, so that the system trains on its own without any help from the users. So this unsupervised learning is kind of made way to the deep learning in the future. So there are two kind of processes in unsupervised classification, which is clustering. Clustering is where the system finds a group of data, and then it sees some similarities between those data, and then it started grouping into clusters A, B, and C. It started grouping people into A, B, and C, and it also gives outputs as in clusters. Association is the system searches for the relationship between A and Y, but it also doesn't cluster it. It only rejects it based upon the rule set of rules. It looks for set of rules. If A fits into that kind of rules, then the input data is considered into as an A data. If A doesn't fit into it, it is termed as an B group and something like that. So the next thing is the unsupervised learning. Over a period of time, it gave birth to a subset of machine learning, which is called deep learning. The recent bloom in the AI industries is mainly owed to the deep learning things. Deep learning is generally simply it's just learning from examples. It looks at the whole historical data. It also learns from the decisions that we made during historical data. So these deep learning architectures are based upon artificial neural networks. Artificial neural network, which is a multiple layer of non-linear processing features. In each layer it uses an output from the previous layer. It is a layer of uh, lot of layers. So the first layer, the input from the first layer, the output from the first layer is considered as an input to the second layer. But at whenever the level increases, the complexity and the representation of the data also increases. Deep learning becomes more efficient as more amount of data is fed into the system. So as you know, the bloom of big data and IoTs made possible to have a lot of flowing of data into the stream. So that's why these deep learning has become more efficient in the time. So the neural networks that are capable of discovering various structures, even if in a millions of data, these kind of systems can can find the relationship between two data and then make them into n clusters or something like that. Is a fascinating thing to be honest. And then finally, the AI. It is a branch. AI, whenever it is kind of made in simple terms, it making machine to think like as human beings. The benchmark of AI has been by human level reasoning, speech, and human level vision is always been the benchmark that has been set to the AI. AI it's a branch of science that concerned with building smart machines which are capable of performing tasks that typically requires our human intelligence. There are kind of three kinds of AI, which is narrow AI, general and strong AI. Now the researchers are currently in the narrow AI, which is like uh, a machine can perform only a specific task more than better than a human, but not every task better than a human. So this is where the AI are at now. So there is another level of AI which is called general AI, in which artificial intelligence reaches a state where it can perform any intellectual task as accuracy as smart as a human being can do. And then there is another third AI, which is like the strong AI, which is what we have been seeing from a lot of Hollywood movies and stuff. So it is a AI which can beat human being at any task, any number of tasks. So the most common experience of AI has been Siri and Alexa, which has been narrow AI, which only does task which has been trained by it. So the applications of machine learning, AL, and AI in satellite imagery is the main thing that we have to be here. So the AI-driven these satellite applications are two kind of things. One is one level application and another is multiple level application. One level application is it only requires the single data, but multi-level application is it also requires satellite imagery and also the sensor data, the ground-based data, or every other non-remote sensing data. The one level apps only require remote sensing data or satellite imagery to do its work. So the AI-driven satellite applications are in demand for a number of reasons. The major thing is like the major leaps in AI also makes people to look, also opens a possibility of including AI in space and remote sensing stuff. The increasing amount of data being produced from the satellites, drones and lidars and stuffs also made an also is one of the reason for why people started looking into machine learning and stuff in the field of satellite imagery. um, the heavy expense of imagery analytics is still performed by the human. Imagery still a lot of things are being performed by human imagery analysts, but it has been deemed maybe even in the near future or maybe the next decade, AI will take over every uh, analyst step that are performed by classification or digitization that has been performed by human analysis, which will increases the time, but it also increases the accuracy in which the things have been done. So the one level application in which machine learning techniques are applied are straight to satellite imagery. The major and the most thing is object detection. So the object detection, the actual information on buildings, road segments, or boundaries for matter in municipalities or any other agencies. Always you always wanted to detect the objects. So, however, while an object detection cache has been enabled, it is a simple process which only requires two networks of layers. One will be it's a simple process like you have two layers. One is of classification and another one is of regression. The first, the objects in the satellite imagery, which are very small, and the input images are enormous, are made as an training data. These methods are not optimized to detect smaller objects. However, these methods are not still optimized to detect smaller images in the large images, but uh, while compared to the larger images, it has done very properly. So these adapting these methods to different scale and the different area of interest or different object of interest in satellite image has been proven to have show some great promise, but the research area is still in an infantry level, or so to say. The accuracy has not been up to the mark that has been applied by the man-made object classification or object detection that has been doing that we have been doing over the last 20 years. The second example of one level application which can be the change detection, which in which has numerous use cases such as crop detection, land use, or urban infrastructure or environmental monitoring and stuff. This goal of the change detection always to create a map in which the change areas are separated from an unchanged ones. That is what the basic change detection things. Uh, yeah, there are two types of change detection that can be furtherly delineated. A binary change detection, where is a single pixel which is associated to two classes, or a multi-class change detection, where there can be the transition type can be easily identified. Um, so the ground truth data, which is a complex and time-consuming data, which has been always collected by the uh, human task in a global scale, in a is tremendously complex. So there are the big players of vendoring are started to uh, classify these ground truth data based upon the earth imaginary using machine learning. The accuracy that they have been achieved is like around 85 percentage. So they are creating more ground truth points in the data using machine learning and deep learning techniques without which in turn completely negates the purpose of people who are doing the ground truth survey once in a while to get ground points and or ground valid points or something like that. Um, but the complexity in these kind of thing is that images in data sets should be normalized in order to given as an input for the training model. So this is a difficult task taking into account there are a lot of satellite imageries which has various resolutions and stuff. So building change reduction solution in an machine learning environment requires a strong strong IT infrastructure and as well as strong ideology in remote sensing data as well. So while going back to the multi-level applications, these are the applications that are built on a complex pipeline, so to say. That is that the information extracted from the satellite imagery is one type of data which combines with another data from non-satellite sources, so to speak. Generally, nowadays the local intelligence by ESRI is one of the major players in AI application. So the ESRI uses traffic data, census data, um, census data, urban heat map, and everything in addition to the Earth observatory data to make a decision based upon the location. So new business organizations have been using this location intelligence data to select their places for their new branches or new franchises. So these kind of various parameters comes into play, depends upon the richness of depends upon the location of the place. It also corresponds to the census data, which will include the normal per capita income per the area. So the franchises are relying on these kind of data, mixing these kind of data with Earth observation data to provide locations which are suitable for various kind of businesses. And the precision farming technique, as I said, like it involves IoTs and drone stuff, which combines with the Copernicus or Sentinel data to provide a more accurate crop monitoring or end-to-end farmland solutions. Generally, crop yields and prices prediction has been generally done during using vegetation indices such as NDVI, which are built basically upon the remote sensing data. But nowadays, there are more, since the development of sensors, there are more of data that have been come into play. So the amalgamation of these features with the remote sensing data which will in turn create a model which where we can predict the future with more accuracy, and we can predict for more time in terms of timing and stuff like that. That's it, so with that we come to the last trend, so to say, the virtual reality and the augmented reality. So the current trends that we have seen till now are both basically based upon data sciences and stuff. But these virtual reality and augmented reality are clearly corresponds to the visualization of the data which that have been collected from satellites or drones, so to say. So as you know, VR, it is an immersion experience that shuts out the physical world. That is, you can, whenever we wear a VR headset, you completely immerse yourself in a virtual world. It enables us to experience a virtual 360-degree to the world, to view it from all the sides. You can move around in it, and then you can even interact with it at some point, at some level. There are nowadays there are a lot of VR games which has a resolution which is completely unbelievable than the real world and stuff like that. There is a cheaper option such as Google Cardboard is available, and then you can also watch VR movies nowadays at malls and stuff like that. AR, augmented reality, which is it is similar to VR, but it adds an artificial elements to the live view. So the games like Pokemon Go is one of the better examples of AR. So you will see so you take the phone and you will follow through a physical world, but the things that you see on the screen is more digital elements are added to it in order to make it more more interesting and stuff like that. So the crucial difference between AR and VR is in VR the customer has the feeling of being there. You can still be in your house, but you can feel the experience of being in an Colosseum or in an even in an opera house or something like that. But in augmented reality, the user have to be there to find more information. For example, Pokemon Go, you have to go to the park. You have to be physically present over there to experience the view or something like so to say. So these are three basic applications that have been already practiced with Earth observation data. So the Cape Outdoors 3D is an web virtual reality mobile app application. So it uses Sentinel Copernicus data. Uh, it is an location track recreational information for tourists. Generally, whenever we go for a tourist information, we generally there will be gates, but once you download this app, it will act as an informational gate for you. So it is basically an app in which you can see the terrain in the app, and it also have more information about the place that you are going to visit in the real time. So it tells a story and something like that. It is one of the pioneers in the tourism, virtual tourism industry. So a lot of people tried these kind of applications during this pandemic, since everyone is not allowed to visit these tourist places and something like that. So virtual tourism is one of the main thing that has been booming in last 2 or 3 years, but it has certain potential to become one of the bigger industries in a while. And Wild Vigo is a similar kind of app which operates in another national park in America. And second one is an Exert application. It is also a virtual reality map which shows 3D building model data, but it's a mixed reality which also combines with augmented reality. So you can also see the current traffic patterns, or in a street. If you are in a street, you can see the current traffic patterns within the area, and also you can also see the residential information to who have been living around this area. So this kind of a fun game opens up to a larger application in such as urban planning. So the more details that you get about a place, it will allow the governments to take better decisions in terms of urban planning, or in terms of tracking um, migration migration of peoples. You can easily estimate urban heat island or something like that. The important applications that we are people has been looking into is environmental monitoring. Um, since you can get more 3D view, more view into that, the the monitoring of place, you don't have literally go to the exact place of the area where you have to monitor. So the data has to be collected from there, and it has to be included in your virtual reality application. So you can get a 360-degree view of the place where you want to monitor without being actually present there. So it actually saves a lot amount of time, and it also increases our attention to the details that are present around it, so you can easily monitor it around it. And then the water quality has been one of the major topics that have been addressed before. So that's it. Thank you for.
Participants, if you have any queries, you may raise now. Participants, if you have any queries, you may raise now. So,
Am
the question from Indrajit is asking that.
yeah, I can see it from.
Okay, okay.
Um, the thing about city census, it has been only yeah, implemented in a single city in America, so it has not been implemented all over the world. So it is a proprietary. The data that we obtain from it is you have to subscribe for the citizens and you have to use it. It has been a kind of a trial purpose in a single city. So uh, once the company started to implement it in all over the places, then we can know about how whatever the price ranges that they are going to offer. But as far as now concerned, they did it in a trial manner. So I don't think for a starting days or starting purposes there won't be any fees or something like that. But it won't be, it doesn't make sense if you are not in the city. So the people who are not from that city has nothing to do with it. So they only gave it to the selected number of trial sample sizes, maybe around 100 or 200. I doesn't know the complete correct answers, but uh, I don't think it's open source still now. But if it comes to others, if they try to extend it to other cities, maybe they can make it as an open source. But it completely in a trial phase. So yeah, that's that. How it will help in Indian context near future? Yeah. So the smart cities. So there are 100 smart cities that are announced in India, right? So these kind of things are the building blocks of the smart city. It may not be in India, it may not be like an exact copycat of the things, but these things can be developed into various other things such as waste management. Maybe in Delhi, of course, in Delhi, the air pollution has been most higher in recent days. So these kind of sensors will be pretty much useful in Delhi and stuff like that. So yeah. Is there any specific program for training a model? Um, program in the sense like um, Parv Kasana, it's a specific program for a training a model. Are you asking about is there any kind of courses available, or is there any kind of already predefined software for training a model? Uh, Something like a dedicated program. Yeah. Yeah, ArcGIS, ESRI has been kind of developing a program, but it's not available to everyone. Maybe the ArcGIS enterprise users may get a view of it, but other than that, you just have to with the common machine learning libraries in Python, such as PyTorch or TensorFlow. Um, People generally use it to train the data as well. There is no dedicated program as I'm aware of. If there is something else, maybe yeah, I will let you know. How can I adapt machine learning techniques in aquifer vulnerability mapping in coastal region? Is there any tools available for train my data and testing? As I know for a fact, there is a program available in Airbus, which automatically which uses machine learning techniques to detect changes in the coastal regions. But I'm not sure about the vulnerability in aquifer mapping. But uh, for a general satellite data, you have to for training you can use the basic neural networks that are available in the market, like using normal tensor flows and normal convoluted networks, like maybe for 2 layers. You just start off with 1 or 2 layers of network, build it from the scratch, and then uh, look take a look at how it went, and then uh, maybe if it doesn't work, maybe we have to opt for another purposes. It's still these things are in an the researchers are in an infant stage, so there is no dedicated programs that are available as for other machine learning techniques for other domains. So our thing is like it's kindly more in an uh, at least in maybe so to say 20% the development is only started happening. So it's already complete trial and error method. So you try with whatever freeze or whatever program that are available for other purposes. You kind of tweak it in a way that you want, so that you can use it for your kind of data or something like that. But as far as I am aware, there is no dedicated tools available to train the data. You have to you have to take advantage of whatever that are already available in the market for common machine learning purposes. Then you have to trial it with it one by one, and then maybe you will find a more suitable solutions in the first try, or you have to use the other 5 things to know what is suitable for it or something like that.
Any other queries? Sir,
Ma'am?
shall we wind up the session?
Yeah.
Okay.
Once again, ma'am. So that is I have entered my email ID in the chat. If anybody has a queries, free to contact me at any time. Um, Maybe I will see what I can do, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Like conduct webinars and practical trainings or internships. Uh, as of now, I'm in my verge of completing my thesis, so I don't think I will be like completely free to conduct these webinars on practical trainings and internship. But if there is anything that I came across that I will maybe I can refer you. You just send a mail to me. Maybe I will refer to a person who can conduct this kind of webinars or something like that. My email ID is. Yes. That's it. So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you everyone for being an sportive audience. Yeah. If you guys have anything to ask, feel free to mail me at any time. I will see. I will try to answer you back within my limits or something like that. Or I will be able to refer you to the person who is more expert in that kind of field than me. Yeah, that's it, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to our guest speaker, Mr. Kirba Mohan sir, for sparing his valuable time for making the session a very meaningful one. Thank you so much, sir. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. Finally, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for the participants for your active participation. I hope you all find this session fruitful and beneficial for future venture. Thank you one and all for your cordial cooperation. Let's break for a lunch. Let's all assemble back sharp by 2 p.m. Participants, the feedback link is posted in the chat box. Please submit your feedback. Thank you. Thank you, sir.